Alright everybody, today I want to talk about Minesweeper. It's an old classic game. It's been on Windows forever, and a lot of people have seen it and maybe played it, but they may not really understand what's going on or how to play it logically. So we're going to take a look at how to play Minesweeper logically as well as possible. There are times where you're going to have to guess. That's always a possibility in this game. But we can minimize those and we can make the smartest guesses possible. So let's just go over some of the basic rules. You've got a field where there are safe spaces and there are mines. If you click on a mine, you are dead, the game's over. Alright, I've got another solved square here. And we can see some of these are blanks, everything around them is safe. Some of them have numbers, which tells you how many of the 8 surrounding squares have bombs or mines. So you can see 3 because there's 3 bombs around this square. So how this works whenever we're playing is we can see that and understand some things about what's going on around it. Let me try to get something where we'll have an easier thing to look at. Okay, so right here we can see that these 2 squares have 1 between them, and we can see that these 3 squares have 2 bombs. I know that this one's a mine because of how those are lined up. And then I can click on the ones around it knowing that they're safe. Trivially, I can see that there's a mine here because we know that there's 1 mine surrounding this, and 5 of those squares are already shown and only 1 can be the mine, so I'll flag that. We have something similar with the 3 here. So here we've got 3. We know that there are 3 around this one. We've already flagged 2 of them, and there's only 1 more square that it can be, so that one must be a mine as well. Now we can see, oh, there's 1 mine around this and it's already flagged, so I can click on those knowing that they're safe. We can continue with this logic a little bit more. Kind of get some easy solves here. This one's not too hard. Okay, it's not surprising. This is the easy board. This is just maybe 10 by 10 with I think 10 mines. The version of Minesweeper that I'm playing here is called Arbiter. I'll leave a link in the description. And it's very similar to the classic Windows Minesweeper that you saw on maybe Windows 95 through XP or Vista 7 whenever they finally took it out, replaced it with more modern things. But this one has some nice tracking and customizable features, and you can use it to competitively track your score and your times and play that way if that's what you like. So now let's move on to some things that are a little bit more advanced. I switched it to an intermediate board so it's larger, there are more mines, it'll give us more chance to see and talk about some more complicated situations. So let's try to get into it and see what we can find. Okay, so one thing that I'm going to come back to a lot is this idea of zones and that we can add and subtract them. And this can tell us a lot about where mines are and where they might be and where they are not. So right here, we've got 1 and we've got 3. Now neither of these on their own tell us anything trivially. We've got 4 squares here, we've got 2 squares here. That's too many unknowns to say something definitively, just looking at one of these squares at a time. But if we look together, we can see that we know there is 1 mine between these first 2, and there's 3 mines between all 4 of these squares. And what you may be able to notice is that we added 2 to our equation here, but we also added 2 mines. We can subtract, essentially, the 1 mine here from the 3 mines here and see that 2 mines have to be here. So we can flag those, and that tells us, in this case, something very useful, because now for these guys over here, we've got some trivial solves. We know that these ones are safe. And we can click that. And now we're going to add and subtract zones again and see that for this zone, we've got 1 remaining, because we've got the 2 flagged already out of the 3 that will surround this entirely. And we've got 1 here in this larger shape, and we can subtract those, and so we know we've got 1 minus 1, which is 0 of course, mines in these cells, and we can clear all of those away, knowing that they're safe. Can do a little bit more trivial solving here, and now we don't really have anything that's certain. We've got 1 here, we've got 2 here, and so 1 here. We've got 2 here, so we know there's 1 here and 1 here in the remaining spaces, but that doesn't really tell us anything definitive right now. So I'm going to make a guess, and I was wrong, so oh well. That happens sometimes. You can't win them all. So here, I flagged a mine. Let me unflag it again so I can talk about it a little easier. We have 1 in these squares and 2 in these. What that can tell us, because the number of mines is going up by 1, and we're adding 1 square to what we're considering, and we're subtracting some, but that's not important right now. We're adding 1 square to what we're considering, and the number of mines is going up by the same amount. Now you can puzzle through exactly why this would be, but what that tells us is that this one has to be a mine. And then we can do some more zone arithmetic, just adding or subtracting it, to see that there's 1 here, there's 1 here, so these ones are safe. I can do a little more. Oops, I was not paying attention and made a mistake. And that happens sometimes if you're not too careful. And I won that one. Looking for any interesting scenarios to be able to teach about. So here's an example of where it's not so obvious just from a glance, but once you get used to it, you can spot this very quickly. The zone addition and subtraction can show us that right here we've got 2 mines, but 1 is known, so we've got 1 more in that region. And then we've got 3 mines, but 2 are known, so we've also got 1 in this larger region. And we can subtract that first portion and know that we subtract 1 mine from 1 mine, and there's only 0 mines left in that remaining area. Now there is some more information. From this 3 I can see that this has definitely got to be a mine. But let's say for now that we didn't know that this was a more complicated area that we were looking at. I can see that there is 1 mine here, and that there are 2 mines here. And so with the same subtraction idea, I know that this region over here has got just 1 mine as well. If I then notice that, hey, I've got this 1 region over here of these 3, then I can subtract this region of 2 and this region of 3 and know that this third square is safe. Even if everything else around here was much more complicated than it is in this scenario, I could learn that from using the addition and subtraction of the zones in that way. Now, this part is a little easier, so I'll just continue on with some of the easy parts. One place where you very often can reason something is when you're up against a wall like this. If you've got 2 1s right in a row, you know the third one's going to be a safe place because, again, the zones subtract out and you know there's nothing there. Now here's an instance where it might look more complicated, but if you can understand the zones correctly, you'll see that this is the exact same thing. We're up against a wall, there's one here, there's one remaining here, and so this one is safe. And now we're kind of stuck over on the left here for now, but let's continue on with the rest and see if we can learn anything more that might help us. We might and we might not. And the one thing that we could learn about that is how many there are total. So now I can see this counter in the corner tells me that there are 2 mines left unflagged on the map, and I know that there's one here and there's one here, which tells me that these other squares have 0 left, so they're all safe, and I can click all of those, and now I've got a very easy solve to finish this one out. So that was a very easy instance of where looking at the picture of the whole board can help us out. Sometimes you can reason about things in a more complicated way, like knowing that there's very few or very many mines left in a remaining area, and that can give you some hints about how to approach it to have the best chances. Sometimes it'll still end up with you hitting a mine, but you can improve your odds greatly if you're able to draw that information out from this counter of how many mines are left. Alright, let's play another round here. So one thing I'll note in all of this is that if you're going for the fastest time that you can, I don't know if this is going to be the best approach, but I think it's definitely a handy thing to have in your tool belt so that whenever you do hit the difficult situations, you can improve your chances of winning and having the opportunity to have a time at all. And just like with anything, the more that you practice it, the quicker you'll get at it. So what may seem like a laborious process at first can get almost automatic and happen very quickly in your mind as you're playing through. Alright, got another pretty easy win there. I'm gonna bump up the difficulty to expert and see if we can run into some more complicated situations to look at. Now we can see this 2 here. It's got one known and a zone where there's going to be one more bomb, and then this 2 on the other side has one known, and we know that there's one more bomb remaining between the 3 squares. Now, since these do overlap, we can see now that we can subtract those, and we know that this one is safe. And then we can do some more trivial work surrounding that and make a lot of progress. Here we can see another instance where we've got 1 here and 2 remaining here. So one way that you can see here that this 1 and this 2 mean that this one has got to be a mine is if you were to think about the opposite. If this one was a safe space, then these 2 would both have to be mines, and we can see that that covers a zone where we already know that there's 1 bomb and only 1, so there can't be 2 mines among where there's only going to be 1. So this one has to be a mine and not a safe space like we tried to think. And then we can have a more simple zone subtraction there and see that that is safe. A lot of times we'll have this kind of situation here where we've got one known space that kind of protrudes into an unknown area, But through looking at the zones, again, we can see that there's one among these 2 squares, and there's one among these 5, and so these 3 have got to be safe. We have another one here, and so we know there's one among these 5, and safe as well. I think I can work something out over there. But first, let me talk through this. So I know I've got 1 here, and I've got 3 here, so I've got 2 in this section that's added. Now that's 2 out of 3 squares or bombs. That's a very dangerous area. I don't want to click anywhere there unless I absolutely have to. If I had to go somewhere, one spot that would be a really good candidate is right up here. And the reason for that is that I don't know anything about it, but I do know that out of all of these squares remaining, there's only 87 bombs, which is a lot, but on the whole order of things, that's not too many. And if that one is not a bomb, if I do click somewhere safe here, then it's going to tell me completely whether this remaining square next to it is a mine or not. Okay, now let's come down here and see if there is something here that I can work out. So from the 4 here, I can see that this region has 2, and I can see that this region has 1 known plus the 2 over there, which means it has 1 down below. And then this guy has got 2 known plus the 1 in these 3, and from subtraction I can see then that this one has to be safe. You can see where this is information that came from way over here. It lends a chain of knowledge that can let us find something out among what otherwise looks like a very complicated, impossible to understand area. Oh shoot, what did I do? I didn't pay attention and I flagged the one around this 4. I flagged 5 spots around this 4. Okay, you know, my logic can be great and then my execution can be flawed, so that happens sometimes. That's alright. Alright, let's start out another spot. And one of the reasons that I usually start in the corners, there's only these 3 squares around it for me to be concerned about if they have bombs or not. Versus if I were to click somewhere out here, it's very likely that at least one will have a mine, and there's not much I can learn from that. But here, it gives me a lot easier places to start. So if I were to click along one of these sides, and if I'm lucky, I've got a 2 in 3 chance that it'll be safe. Didn't happen that time. 2 isn't a good starting point. This one's even luckier. Let me see if any of these other corners. Okay, here's another corner with a 1. So if I click next to it, okay, good. I had the 2 in 3 chance that I'd be safe. And this time I was safe. And now what that can tell me is I'm very lucky now that this one was a 1. The other options would be that it would be a 2 or a 3. If it's a 1, then I know that these 2 are safe. If it were a 3, I would know that they were both bombs. If it were a 2, well, I would know that one of them is a mine, and I wouldn't really be able to do anything useful with that. In this case, it was a 1, so I knew these were both safe. I've got 2 more 1s, so I know there's a zone of 1 here, and I can subtract and know that these 3 are safe. Another zone subtraction, I can know these 4 are safe over here, and now a bigger area has opened up that's easier to work with. I've also got that other corner that I started that normally I wouldn't keep going like that. I would definitely have taken advantage of that as far as I could. Let me show you how that would look. Because there's not a lot I could do here, but I do know that this 1 is safe. And now I know that this one is a mine. It's the same principle as we would see on a flat surface like this 1 and 2, but it does work here as well. Whenever you've got this, you're adding 1 to the zone, and you're adding 1 new square to the zones you're considering, and you're adding 1 mine to the total number. If those two numbers are equal, you're adding 2 new squares, and you're adding 2 to the number of mines, like this one in fact. Then you also know that those 2 are both mines. Trying to do something similar in reverse does not work universally. Going from 2 to 1 doesn't necessarily tell me anything. I would need to know that, like here, I've got, now this is 1 and this is 1. And I can work with that. There are some scenarios, some configurations of numbers and bombs and squares that you'll see over and over, and you can get familiar with those, but I think it's more important to learn the general principles because there are just so many possibilities for what you can encounter that if all you know the logic for is a few things that you memorized, you're not going to get very far. There's going to be a lot of scenarios that you come across and you don't know what to do. But that's where this idea of the zones can really come in and help you through a great deal of different things that you might run into, no matter how complicated everything around it is. And by the way, you may notice that I am clearing out a lot of squares very quickly, and the way that I do that on this version anyway is I can hold down the right mouse button and click the left on a safe place, and as long as that is a place where, like here, 2 mines are known around a 2 square, it will clear out all of the spaces that are open. If you're playing Minesweeper on a mobile device, you may not have that same thing, but there may be something similar. There's a million versions of Minesweeper out there for every platform imaginable. Okay, so I'm not seeing anything that I can do right now that would be sure to be safe, which is always the goal. I want to do things that I'm sure are safe, but maybe I can learn something by looking at the totals and reasoning about the unknown spaces. So I've got 12 mines left on this board, and from the remaining zones I know, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So then there's 5 more in the other squares, which are all back around here, that I don't know about. It's not great odds because I feel like there's anywhere I click is pretty likely to have a problem, but I'm going to make the best guess that I can see to try to make, and that's partly based on what is safest and partly on what will tell me the most useful information, because I don't want to do something where I'm just going to get useless information. If I'm going to make a guess, if at all possible, I want it to enlighten me more. So what I'm going to try to do, I know that there's 1 here. This spot's completely unknown to me, and I can click it and see it's a 4, which tells me if there's 1 here, there's 1 known here, then these 2 are both mines. So I was very lucky with that guess that it not only was safe, but told me very useful information. And then with that, I can continue on a little more. Again, it helps if I pay attention and don't make stupid mistakes. But, you know, I am talking through all this and trying to explain it, and that distracts me a little bit. I could always make a stupid mistake anyway, but I'm going to go ahead and blame it on the fact that I am recording them while I'm doing this. We'll blame that. Yeah. Here's an instance of a kind of complicated zone addition that we can do. I switched it to a smaller but very mine-dense board so that we could kind of try to cycle through some more interesting scenarios here. So we've got one remaining up here, and we've got one remaining here, and we know that we've got two among all of these squares. Now, what can the zone addition tell us here is that between here and here, we've got two, and in all of this we've got two, which leaves this guy as a single square that we can say is safe. We've got a similar situation here. We've got one, and we've got one, and we know that this is two, so this guy has got to be a safe place as well. So here we can see that we've got one among all of these. We know that there's one among these two, and there's one among these two, and there's one among all of these squares. Now, any of these could be a mine. I can't say anything with certainty here that I can go anywhere 100% safely. But I can say that these squares outside of these ones are pretty safe. It would be very unlikely, I would be very surprised if I were to find that these guys' mines are here in their furthest positions, both of them, and that the one that I happen to click on over here to try to expand my knowledge is going to blow up on me. So let's try that and see how far I can get off of that hope. Not very far. I didn't get anything useful from the first one, and the second one, sure enough, was a mine. So now we see that there are 3 mines left on this board, and there are a lot of unknown spaces here. There's one here, and there's one here. That might represent 1 mine or 2, but either way, there are not a lot of mines out in the rest of this board. So I'm going to try to click over here and see, okay, that one was safe, and everything around it is safe as well, so I can clear up some of that. Okay, now I know there's one here, there's one here, and there's one here, which will tell me that this ones are safe. And there's one here and 2 here. So there's no great information there. It might be anything here. So among these 3, I know that there's only one. And I know that if I have a safe spot here, then it will tell me completely whether this square is or is not a mine. So I'm going to try that and see what I get. Okay, it was safe, and it's a 2, which tells me this one and this one are the same. This one is a safe spot as well. And now 3, this will tell me about this square, and I know it's a mine. And there we go. I was able to clear up a very difficult end section with just one guess of a 1/3 chance of hitting a mine. And everything else worked out nicely. I was able to get the information I needed to solve that portion. So you can see where there's a balancing act sometimes between what is known, what's certain, what's a possibility, and what is useful. You can't go completely to one extreme or the other, because at some point you can't make certain guesses. At some point you can't just assume that, oh, well, that would be useful, I'm going to try that. You've got to kind of try to strike a proper balance among those things to understand what'll be the most advantageous, what's going to give me the most likely in the end result that I will win this whole board. Alright, I hope you enjoyed learning about Minesweeper in more detail, and that you go out and have some fun with it. You know, you can find it for any device, any platform. There's all kinds of versions out there. They all will play very similarly, and you can use logic and probability to give yourself the best chance of winning that you can. I want to see how I can highlight things so that I can actually talk about things and let the audience know what I'm seeing inside my brain.